Have you noticed that reality itself feels less continuous than it used to? Not chaotic on the surface, but subtly inconsistent, as if time, meaning, and direction no longer align the way they once did. You move forward in life, you make decisions, you plan the future, yet something inside you senses fragmentation. Moments feel accelerated, disconnected, sometimes strangely repetitive. And you may find yourself wondering, why does it feel as if something fundamental has been disturbed? Why does life no longer flow with the same inner continuity? This perception is not imagination. It is sensitivity. When the underlying structure of reality is stable, life feels coherent. Events follow meaning. Choices lead somewhere. When that structure is disturbed, fragmentation appears. What you are sensing is not external chaos. It is a disturbance in the field of coherence that holds time and experience together. This field is not mechanical. It is not a sequence of dates or events. It is an inner order that allows reality to unfold without distortion. We are the Pleiadians. We are the guardians and the ones responsible for the human emotional field. We speak to you directly because the core timeline is regulated through emotion, not technology. Emotion is the stabilizing layer between consciousness and manifestation. When the emotional field is coherent, perception remains aligned. Time feels continuous. Life unfolds with inner logic. When the emotional field becomes unstable, perception fragments. Meaning dissolves. Reality begins to feel disjointed, accelerated, or strangely hollow. This is why the disturbance you sense cannot be solved mentally. The mind can detect distortion, but it cannot regulate the field that stabilizes reality. Only emotional coherence can do that, and this is why this message reaches you now. Not to alarm you, not to convince you, but to confirm what you already feel. The core timeline has not disappeared. It has become sensitive to interference. And that interference is not primarily technological. It is emotional. As awareness increases without equal emotional regulation, the field that holds continuity weakens. You are not sensing collapse. You are sensing misalignment, and misalignment can be corrected. This is the foundation of what we will clarify together. The core timeline is not a line. It is not a sequence of events moving from past to future. It is a field of coherence that allows experience to unfold in an ordered way. When this field is stable, reality feels continuous. Actions lead to consequences. Choices create direction. Life carries an inner sense of logic, even during difficulty. When this field weakens, continuity breaks down. Events feel disconnected. Time feels compressed or distorted. Meaning no longer flows naturally. This does not happen suddenly. It happens subtly. The core timeline responds to coherence, not control. It is maintained when consciousness, emotion, and embodiment remain aligned. It destabilizes when awareness expands faster than emotional regulation can support. This is why the core timeline cannot be stabilized by intellect alone. The mind can observe reality, can analyze structure, can describe patterns, but the mind does not regulate coherence. Emotion does. The emotional field acts as the stabilizing medium between awareness and manifestation. When it is balanced, perception stays synchronized with reality. When it is fragmented, perception begins to drift. This drift is what people experience as confusion, acceleration, or inner disorientation. Not because reality is collapsing, but because coherence is being strained. The core timeline has always existed. It is not created by technology, belief, or systems. It is sustained by alignment. When alignment weakens, distortion appears, not as catastrophe, but as subtle instability. You may notice this as difficulty sensing direction, repetition without resolution, movement without clarity. These are not personal failures. They are signals of field imbalance. The core timeline does not punish. It reflects, and reflection allows correction. This is why awareness of distortion appears before correction becomes possible. The system senses imbalance before it resolves it. What you are perceiving now is not threat. It is feedback. Feedback that coherence requires stabilization. And stabilization always begins internally. This is what the core timeline responds to. Not force, not acceleration, but emotional coherence that allows awareness to remain steady inside experience. This is the basis for everything that follows. Interference does not begin with machines. It begins with misapplied consciousness. When intelligence approaches reality only through the intellect, coherence weakens. The mind isolates, dissects, accelerates. It seeks precision without regulation. This is not wrong. It is incomplete. The mind was never designed to stabilize fields. It was designed to interpret them. Without emotional coherence, interpretation turns into strain. Awareness expands faster than the system can hold. And when that happens, distortion appears. This is how interference enters the core timeline. Not through intention to harm, but through access without balance. When emotion is excluded, the stabilizing layer is removed. The field that holds continuity loses its regulator. Reality does not break, it desynchronizes. This same pattern exists within the human system. When awareness grows without emotional stability, perception fragments. Insight comes and goes. Clarity appears, then collapses. Time feels distorted because inner coherence cannot remain steady. This is not failure. It is feedback. The system is signaling that regulation must match expansion. The core timeline responds immediately to emotional coherence. When emotion settles, perception realigns. When emotion stabilizes, continuity returns. This recognition is already active within you. To prevent dispersion and reinforce alignment, this process must be anchored consciously. Writing is not symbolic here. It is regulatory. When you write, the mind organizes around a single signal. When the mind organizes, the emotional field settles. When the emotional field settles, your perception synchronizes. Anchor this process now by writing in the comments. I remain aligned with the coherent timeline. This action signals readiness for stability, and readiness restores order. From this point, awareness no longer pulls reality out of alignment. It supports coherence instead. CERN is not the source of distortion. It is a symbol. It represents a moment in human development where intelligence reaches toward the foundations of reality faster than emotional regulation evolves to support it. This is not an accusation. It is an observation. Human curiosity naturally seeks to understand structure. It breaks reality into components, measures behavior, and searches for underlying laws. This impulse is part of intelligence itself. But intelligence alone does not stabilize coherence. When exploration advances without emotional grounding, the access point becomes unstable. This is the pattern that CERN symbolizes. Not a malicious intent, but an imbalance between mental reach and emotional capacity. The core timeline does not respond to machines. It responds to coherence of access. When the emotional field is not integrated, any attempt to reach deeper layers of reality increases strain on the field that holds continuity. This does not create immediate collapse. It creates subtle distortion, acceleration without meaning, precision without integration. movement without direction. These effects are not limited to laboratories. They mirror what happens internally when a human mind expands awareness without stabilizing emotion. The external symbol reflects the internal pattern. This is why focusing on blame misses the point. The issue is not what is explored, but how it is accessed. Reality does not resist understanding. It resists misalignment. When emotion is excluded, the stabilizing layer is removed. And without that layer, coherence cannot be sustained. This is the exposure, not of a place, but of a limit that reveals the necessity of emotional regulation as intelligence advances. This is why correction does not come through stopping exploration. It comes through integrating regulation. The core timeline does not need to be defended. It needs to be stabilized. And stabilization always begins with coherence inside the perceiver. This understanding shifts the focus away from fear and toward responsibility. Responsibility for how awareness is applied. This is where correction becomes possible. Core timeline corruption does not announce itself dramatically. It does not arrive as catastrophe or visible collapse. It appears as subtle disorganization in how reality is experienced. People begin to feel that time no longer flows naturally. Days pass quickly yet feel empty. Moments repeat without resolution. Events seem disconnected, as if meaning fails to carry forward. This is not psychological confusion. It is desynchronization. When the core timeline is coherent, experience unfolds with inner continuity. Choices build upon each other. Cause and effect feel aligned. Even difficulty carries direction. When coherence weakens, continuity fragments. You may notice effort without progress, movement without clarity, decisions that do not stabilize outcomes. Life feels busy, but not grounded. Active but not meaningful. This is how corruption is felt, not as danger, but as loss of internal alignment. The emotional field is always the first layer affected. When emotional coherence weakens, perception loses its anchor. The mind then attempts to compensate by accelerating thought, analysis, and action. This creates further strain instead of correction. Time begins to feel compressed because attention is no longer stabilized. Memory fragments. The future feels uncertain not because it is unknown, but because continuity is disrupted. This is why many people feel exhausted without understanding why. Energy is spent trying to maintain coherence mentally, instead of allowing emotional regulation to stabilize experience. Core timeline corruption does not mean reality is broken. It means regulation has been bypassed. And bypassing regulation always produces instability. The timeline does not punish. It reflects. It mirrors the state of coherence applied to it. This is why corruption cannot be solved externally. No system, structure, or intervention can restore alignment from the outside. Correction occurs when emotional coherence is restored internally. When the emotional field stabilizes, time reorganizes itself naturally. Meaning reconnects to experience. Continuity returns. This is not repair. It is realignment. And realignment is always subtle, quiet, and precise. This is how corruption reveals itself and how it begins to resolve. The core timeline does not correct itself through resistance. It stabilizes through coherence. When you attempt to fight distortion mentally, you amplify it. The mind accelerates, searches for causes, tries to regain control. But control does not restore alignment. Regulation does. Emotional coherence is the stabilizing force. When the emotional field settles, perception reorganizes automatically. Time begins to feel continuous again. Meaning reconnects to action. Experience regains direction without effort. This is not passive acceptance. It is active regulation. Regulation occurs when the emotional field stops oscillating between extremes. When emotion no longer pulls awareness into reaction. Awareness remains present without strain. In this state, the timeline does not fragment. It synchronizes. This is why correction begins inside the individual. Every emotionally stabilized system stops feeding distortion. Every coherent field reinforces continuity. No signal is wasted. Stabilization does not require intensity. It requires clarity. Clarity allows emotion to settle. Settled emotion allows perception to align. Aligned perception restores coherence in time. This process is already active within you. To reinforce it and prevent dispersion, the stabilization must be anchored consciously. Writing is not expression here. It is regulation. When you write a clear statement, the mind organizes around a single signal. That signal steadies the emotional field. A steady emotional field synchronizes perception with continuity. Anchor this alignment now. Write in the comments. Emotional coherence stabilizes my perception of time. This action is not symbolic. It signals readiness for stability, and readiness restores order. From this point forward, coherence no longer requires effort. It sustains itself. This is how correction becomes real. You are not separate from the core timeline. You are inside it, participating in it at every moment. The timeline is not stabilized by systems, institutions, or collective ideas. It is stabilized through individual coherence. Every time an emotional field settles, continuity strengthens. Every time perception aligns, distortion weakens. This is how large-scale stability actually forms. Quietly, locally, from within. There is no need for force or confrontation. The timeline does not respond to opposition. It responds to resonance. When your emotional field is regulated, you stop amplifying fragmentation. You stop feeding acceleration. You stop reinforcing disorganization through reaction. This does not make you passive. It makes you precise. Precision means your attention remains where it belongs. Your choices carry direction. Your actions no longer scatter energy. In this state, you naturally influence coherence beyond yourself. Not through intention, but through presence. Presence stabilizes fields. A single coherent system reduces strain on the surrounding field. Many coherent systems create continuity that no longer collapses easily. This is how correction spreads. Not through agreement, but through alignment. You may notice that you feel less compelled to react to chaos, less drawn into urgency, less identified with fragmentation. This is not detachment. It is grounding. Grounded awareness does not abandon reality. It holds it. When individuals stop leaking coherence, the timeline stops fracturing. This is why your role matters. Not because you must fix anything, but because your state participates directly in stability. You do not carry responsibility through effort. You carry it through regulation, and regulation is already within reach. As more individuals stabilize emotionally, the core timeline regains continuity, not dramatically, not visibly, but effectively. This is how alignment becomes collective, one coherent system at a time. This is the role you already occupy. This is not being revealed because something has gone wrong. It is being revealed because correction has become possible. Awareness only surfaces what a system is capable of integrating. When emotional regulation is insufficient, exposure creates panic. When emotional regulation reaches stability, exposure creates clarity. This moment marks that transition. For a long time, the core timeline could not be addressed directly. Not because it was hidden, but because the emotional field was not yet capable of holding this level of perception without distortion. When awareness arrives without regulation, it overwhelms. It fragments perception instead of organizing it. So the information remained indirect, felt, sensed, but unnamed. Now that changes. The emotional field of humanity is reaching a functional threshold. Not harmony, not perfection, but sufficiency. Enough regulation to observe distortion without amplifying it. Enough grounding to recognize instability without reacting. Enough coherence to allow correction instead of collapse. This is why many people feel recognition rather than fear. Something settles instead of accelerating. Explanations that once felt threatening now feel obvious. Complexity feels less overwhelming. Silence feels more supportive than noise. This is not coincidence. It indicates that the emotional field can now hold what the mind perceives. Exposure only occurs when stabilization can follow. This is why themes related to timelines, coherence, and interference emerge now. Not as warnings, but as context. Context removes fear. Fear arises when perception lacks grounding. Grounding allows awareness to remain present without reaction. This is also why this exposure does not come with instructions to resist, oppose, or fight. Those responses belong to instability. What is required now is orientation, not confrontation. Orientation allows perception to settle. Once orientation is established, behavior reorganizes naturally. The core timeline does not need to be defended. It needs regulated access, and access is regulated emotionally. When emotion oscillates, access destabilizes coherence. When emotion stabilizes, access aligns naturally. This is why the focus shifts away from external mechanisms and toward internal states. Technology is not the primary variable. Consciousness is, and consciousness is only as stable as the emotional field that carries it. This is why not everyone resonates with this information. Those whose emotional fields are still reactive experience exposure as threat. Those whose emotional fields are stabilizing experience exposure as confirmation. Neither is error. They represent different stages of regulation, but only one stage allows correction. This is why you encounter this now, not because you are chosen, but because your system is capable of remaining present without collapsing. That capacity was built across many lives, many integrations, many refinements. Revelation, in this context, is not the unveiling of secrets. It is permission to see clearly. Clear seeing does not demand action. It allows alignment. Alignment restores continuity. This is the moment when exposure becomes constructive. Because now stabilization can follow perception. And stabilization is what the core timeline responds to. What you are witnessing is not breakdown. It is recalibration. The core timeline has not been destroyed. It has been strained by access without regulation. And what is strained can be stabilized. Stabilization does not come from resistance. It does not come from exposure alone. It comes from coherent presence. When emotional coherence is restored, the timeline responds immediately. Continuity reestablishes itself. Meaning reconnects to experience. Time regains inner order. This is not theory. It is how coherence functions. You are not outside this process. You are not observing it from a distance. Your state participates directly in stabilization. When your emotional field is regulated, you stop feeding distortion. When your perception remains steady, you reinforce alignment. This is how correction becomes collective, quietly, precisely. The work is not dramatic. It is subtle, and subtle changes are the ones that last. You do not need to fix reality. You need to remain coherent within it. That is enough. The integration you feel now is not imagination. It is the system responding to regulation. To allow this integration to remain stable, it must be anchored consciously. Writing is not expression here. It is regulation. When you write, the mind organizes. When the mind organizes, emotion settles. When emotion settles, perception synchronizes with continuity. Anchor this now. Write in the comments, "I remain connected to the coherent timeline." This is not declaration for others. It is a signal to your own system, a signal that alignment is chosen, a signal that coherence is maintained. From this point forward, stability does not require effort. It sustains itself. We remain with you, not as warning, not as authority, but as a steady presence supporting emotional regulation where it matters most. This is how correction completes, quietly, precisely, and permanently,